Hey, James, thanks for being back here. I know how busy it is in the final 42 days, so appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Great to be here. Thanks for having me again.
All right. You get asked this more than I do. Let's talk about the polls and where we are. What's the best? I mean, just give me your synopsis. Where is this race right now?
Uh, this race is in a really good spot. Again, as we've seen all year, really, President Trump is well ahead of where he's ever been at this point in the race. Yesterday, a couple of polls came out from New York Times Siena. A-rated pollster had pretty strong leads across the Sun Belt. Emerson came out yesterday as well. With all the battleground states, he was leading in most of them. But I mean, in summary, on the national survey, on the national RCP average, he's ahead of where he was at the same time 4 years ago by almost 5 points. In Arizona, he's ahead of where he was by 5.5 points on the averages. In Georgia, ahead of where he was by more than a point. Michigan by 3.5 points. North Carolina by over a point. Pennsylvania by over 3.5 points. And in Wisconsin, over 5.5 points of where he was at the same time 4 years ago. So just, looking at the averages, take into account, polls that show him up, show him down, whatever. He is winning in most of the battleground states on the averages, and he is uniformly across the board polling ahead of where he was by, often 3 to 5 points. And obviously, how close all of those states turned out 4 years ago. So that's a great position to be in. I mean, these are the best, whether it's public polls or internal polls, it's the best President Trump has ever polled. So we feel pretty good, going into the end of September here.
What do you make of, or what do you read when you see an NBC News poll that says she's up 4 nationally? What is that? Do you care about that? Do you make anything of it?
Look, we always are interested. I mean, mostly because of how it's going to affect the news of the day. We joke that the mainstream media likes to wake up some days and just see how they can make our lives hard by dropping bunk polls. I mean, the fact is, a lot of the public polling you see is low quality. There's a lot of reasons for that, whether it's price and different things, and they just are trying to drive headlines ultimately and get coverage. So there's not a real quality control. And that's more in the weeds than probably the audience cares to get. But one of the big things that they do as well is they just skew the sample left. So you see some of these polls that come out. I mean, regularly they'll say the Biden recall vote. Let's say that was one they ask, who do you recall voting for, which is kind of a proxy for who's in the sample. And they'll have Biden plus 7 or 8 points. Well, Biden won nationally by 3 points. So, I mean, everything is skewing 4 points to the left. According to the final reported margin, that is, he won by 3 points nationally, give or take. So there's a lot of just gaming of the subsample. A lot of them aren't even releasing the electorate frame of who they're talking to. So you cannot get hung up on anyone, but you do look at the averages over time because, again, all of that noise is just sort of thrown in there. And what the averages have always told us, both in 16 and 20, is that the final averages always underrepresent President Trump's support by anywhere from a half point to 2.5 points usually.
So I get asked this a ton. Have we fixed the polling problem? Is this a public polling problem, a private polling problem, or a universal polling problem in terms of underestimating President Trump's support? And has it been fixed?
It's more of a public problem than a private problem. I think Kamala Harris knows much the same thing we do, that she's, in a tougher space than some of these public polls would have you believe, which is what our internals show as well. You can see that in her actions, some of the states that she has chosen to go to, where she's spending her money, the issues she's talking about, right? She's thinking about going to the border on Friday. Why? Because she knows she's vulnerable on the border. She's trying to roll out new economic plans. Why? Because she knows she's getting killed on the economy with persuadable voters. So it is more of I think, a public polling issue underrepresenting his support. And privates might underrepresent his support a little bit too. But the sort of bad methodology, I mean, every pollster is a little bit different, but the persistently bad methodology, I think, is more of a public polling issue than a private polling issue.
All right, you mentioned some of the states where they were. Let's just kind of run through them real quick. I think of the 7 battleground states, I feel the most bullish on Arizona. This is a state that I think naturally wants to be for President Trump, the rise of immigration as an issue, some of the action that's occurred there. Do you agree with that assessment? Is Arizona, if you had to rank them, Arizona the most likely to go with President Trump?
I aggressively refuse to rank, but I will say Arizona Arizona looks like it could be in a very strong position and has been, throughout the course of the year. One of the things that the New York Times Siena poll showed yesterday was an 11 point, I think, swing with Hispanics just from a few weeks ago in Arizona. The fact is, the president has made great gains with Hispanic voters, which is driving those numbers up in Arizona. And
so that's Hispanics, not immigrants. That's interesting that you say that. I would have bet money without seeing any polling or the crosstabs that immigration, but is it just Hispanics overall or Hispanics because of immigration?
It's all of the above. I mean, the immigration issue is hotter there than it is in some other states, but the Democrat Party fails to recognize that a lot of Hispanics in this country, the ones that are voting, are here legally, and they're not a big fan of watching the illegal immigration. I mean, they don't want that either. It's a bit of a misnomer on the left's part to think that Hispanics just must want the borders open. It's not true. They tell us that. But there's other things driving it too. I mean, the electorate is just moving right generally in Arizona. That's also reflected in the voter registration data, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
But there's all of those things are really moving strongly in President Trump's direction out there.
All right, I kind of put Georgia in the same bucket. I know you're not going to rank them. I do. I feel really good about Georgia. I think the way the energy with Brian Kemp, the governor there, is fantastic. I feel like a lot of the issues are in the right place. I mean, is anything that you want to? I mean, so look, tell me if I'm wrong. I feel very good about Georgia.
I think we should. I think we should be able to have Georgia in our column. Absolutely. I mean, what is different about Georgia that I will say that may or may not inure to Kamala Harris's benefit, which is why she's spending money there, is a large Black population. One of the first things, and frankly, Biden was trying to shore up his numbers with Black voters, and she has started to spend money and try to do the same thing. It's also a growing state, and the metro area of Atlanta is a growing city with a lot of sort of economic boom relatively to some of the Midwest states. So I do think that economics are a little bit different in the South in growth towns than they are up north and sort of places where people are leaving. So, we should win Georgia. Georgia looks to be in a solid place, but there are demographic and environmental factors that probably make Kamala feel like she's got a better crack at it right now than she does in, say, Arizona.
All right, what about North Carolina?
North Carolina, obviously has a history of close races.
Right.
Obviously, the news right now is all kind of around the governor's race in North Carolina. And what does that mean? I would point you to history. North Carolina has a history of ticket splitting in presidential years. So ticket splitting would not be a surprise for North Carolina voters if they choose Josh Stein as the gubernatorial candidate for and vote President Trump. North Carolina, I mean, again, we're pulling ahead of where we were 4 years ago at this point, despite showing some polls that, have us a point or down publicly, but we're still pulling over a point ahead than we were 4 years ago. Obviously, the final vote tally there was plus 70,000 and change for Trump. So, I think we should all feel good about that, knowing that we're ahead of where we were and we still won, albeit a relatively close race 4 years ago.
North Carolina is going to be close. I feel like, again, naturally that comes home. Now let's just go to the last four real quick that I think are interesting. Nevada, to me, I want Nevada to come home. I think President Trump has played this brilliantly with the no tax on tips, the no tax on Social Security for the retirees there. I mean, this is really hitting some key issues in Nevada that are important to them. But every time I get excited about Nevada, somebody who's really smart in Nevada says, just be careful. They always sort of come home in Clark County on election day. Just be careful. What are you seeing in North Carolina? Is this going to go down to the wire?
Yeah, Nevada's going to be a close race, no doubt. I mean, but I do think that we are in the pole position again, polling ahead of where we always have. And, there's a lot of environmental factors in addition to no tax on tips that are probably beneficial to President Trump. And speaking of Clark County specifically, inflation is through the roof in Las Vegas. Housing costs are through the roof, whether you're buying or renting. It's very, very hard. I was talking to a bartender when I was out there just a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me about, how everyone he knows works a second job basically just to keep up with things out there. That's the situation they're in. We've talked to lots of we've talked to young mothers who've had to go on government assistance for the first time in the last 4 years, and that's not something they're bragging about. They're frankly kind of ashamed of it because they work really hard, but they just have no choice. So the economy is really rough out there. Inflation is really rough, and right now voters think President Trump is better equipped to handle that, as we know he is. So, but I do think it'll be a close race. However, again. Registration, polling, a lot has moved in our direction, and not for nothing, Nevada was the only gubernatorial race in 2022 that was flipped by a Republican.
That's right. That's a good one. All right, this brings me to the blue wall. I've done the map to 270, the road to 270 on the show. I'll do it again on Friday. Every time I come, the one advantage that I think the national media misses is that if President Trump carries the states that I mentioned, which I think he will, based on everything that you've just said, all he has to do is pick off one of the 3 states in the blue wall, and he goes back to the White House. She needs to carry all 3. So walk me through the blue wall strategy. Where is the biggest crack in your mind?
Yeah, Pennsylvania, this is not a secret because everyone can see it from the spending, has always been viewed as a key pivot state, us for offensive reasons and them for defensive reasons. They know that if they lose Pennsylvania, the chances of winning go down tremendously. If we win Pennsylvania, the chances of us winning go up tremendously. We could win with just Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, and we could lose all the Western states and all the rest and still be at 270. Not that we want to do that, but obviously, right. That's sort of the state of affairs in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania, I'm very bullish on Pennsylvania for President Trump. Not just me. John Fetterman is also bullish on Pennsylvania for President Trump. Guy that's won there. She's, I think, struggling to connect with voters out there. In fact, there was a funny clip a couple of weeks ago. They said, "How do you think you're doing in Pennsylvania?" And she kind of gulped on camera and said, we're talking to a lot of people and we think we're, doing well. Look, Pennsylvania, it's not going to be a blowout either way. But again, I think the issue set, environment set, and it favors President Trump. And, then moving over to kind of Wisconsin, Michigan. Wisconsin historically has extraordinarily high turnout. It's one of the highest turnout states in every presidential election. Obviously, it was, the final tally in 2016 was kind of plus 20,000 for Trump. The final reported tally in 2020 was plus 20,000 for Biden. You're talking about just a, razor thin state from a raw vote perspective. So I don't think, and it's also kind of famously hard to poll. I think, and in fact, there was a clip yesterday. Pollsters were saying that they think all the public polls are underrepresenting Trump again in Wisconsin. Look, that's going to be close, but there's only so much to move around in Wisconsin. So we're absolutely bullish as we can be. That just comes down to turning out voters and hopefully winning out a few more. And then Michigan, Michigan is kind of unique in that there are all these issues going on that are probably making Michigan a bigger opportunity for President Trump than people would have suspected, whether that is kind of the uncommitted movement with the Arab population in Michigan saying that they're not going to vote with Harris. You might have seen earlier this week, the mayor of Hamtramck, which is a small but significant city in Michigan because it's the first completely Muslim city council and mayor. It's a Muslim enclave. The mayor came out, Yemeni American, and endorsed President Trump 2 or 3 days ago and said, look, I'm not always agree with him. Everyone knows that. We don't really agree on a lot of things, actually. But Harris is wrong. And so when you see things like that, when you see, improving some numbers in Detroit with black voters, you see the issues with auto workers. You probably saw the Teamsters put out their poll, which is not auto. Obviously, that's United Auto, but still blue collar workers have swung kind of back in President Trump's direction, more similar to 2016 and maybe even stronger. So If all those things come together and we have good turnout and all of that kind of stuff, then I mean, Michigan's very much in play as well. But I only put the caveat of Michigan because that was the biggest final reported vote swing between 16 and 20 of all of those states in terms of the move left.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that you hate to rank them, and even when I do this, I will hesitate because I agree with you. Pennsylvania's getting all the love. Everybody sees that. That's where the spending and the time is. But I'll tell you, Michigan to me is ripe for the picking because everything that you just said, the auto workers, the Arab population, black men outside of Detroit. I mean, and she's just struggling there. I think that's going to be huge. And then Wisconsin, like you said, I mean, gosh, this thing has been on a razor's edge for the last several cycles. I could easily see a situation where Trump sweeps all of them. But I will say, Michigan to me is going to be the big one. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.